It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Maplewood. Maplewood was a quiet little place, a neighborhood where houses sat close together, and green lawns stretched out in front of them. Kids rode bikes down the street. Dogs barked at squirrels. Everyone knew everyone, or at least, that's what they thought. People waved at each other. They said hi. They smiled. It was peaceful. It was friendly. It was home. But something was about to shake things up. Something big. And it all started with a guy named Jake Peterson. Jake was new. He rolled into Maplewood one day in an old, beat-up truck. The truck wasn't shiny. It wasn't new. It rattled a little when it stopped, and the paint was scratched all over. But Jake didn't care. He liked it just fine. He parked it right in front of his new house, a small place with a blue door and a tiny porch. Jake hopped out, stretched his arms, and looked around. He had a big, friendly smile on his face. His hair was messy, and he wore an old t-shirt and jeans. He didn't look fancy. He didn't act loud. He was just a regular guy, or so everyone thought. Jake grabbed a toolbox from the back of his truck. It was a red toolbox, a little rusty, but full of stuff: hammers, screwdrivers, nails. He carried it up to his porch and set it down with a thump. Then he turned around and waved at the neighbors. "Hi," he called out. His voice was cheerful. A lady across the street waved back. A kid on a bike slowed down to stare. An old man watering his flowers nodded. Jake seemed nice. Jake seemed normal. Jake seemed like he'd fit right in. But here's the thing: Jake wasn't just a regular guy. Nope. He had a secret. A big one. A secret that was going to flip this sleepy little street upside down. What was it? Oh, you'll find out soon. Just keep reading. See, Maplewood wasn't used to big surprises. It was a place where things stayed the same. The houses looked alike. The trees grew tall and shady. The same people walked their dogs every morning. The same mailman dropped off letters every afternoon. It was calm. It was boring, some might say. But that's how the folks in Maplewood liked it. They didn't want trouble. They didn't want noise. They just wanted everything to stay easy and quiet. And Jake? He looked like he'd be part of that quiet life. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't blast music or throw wild parties. He just parked his old truck, grabbed his toolbox, and started unpacking boxes in his new house. But not everyone was happy to see Jake. Nope. Not at all. A few houses down the street, maybe 3 or 4 houses away, 2 guys stood on a porch and watched him. Their eyes were sharp. Their faces weren't friendly. These guys were named Tom and Larry. Tom was tall and skinny, with a pointy nose and a frown that never went away. Larry was shorter, with a round belly and a loud laugh that sounded mean instead of nice. They weren't regular neighbors. They didn't wave or smile like the others. They just stared. And they whispered to each other. What were they saying? Something sneaky. Something not so nice. Because Tom and Larry weren't just regular guys either. They had a plan. A bad plan. And Jake was about to get caught up in it. Tom and Larry called themselves the HOA Patrol. HOA stands for Homeowners Association. It's a group that makes rules for a neighborhood, like, no painting your house purple or keep your grass short. But here's the funny thing: Maplewood didn't have a real HOA. Nope. It never did. Tom and Larry made it up. They pretended. They acted like they were big bosses who could tell everyone what to do. They even made little badges out of paper and taped them to their shirts. The badges said HOA Patrol in messy handwriting. Fancy, huh? Not really. It was fake. All of it. But nobody in Maplewood knew that yet. Nobody except Jake, maybe. Because Jake? He wasn't fooled. Not one bit. Tom leaned over to Larry that sunny afternoon. Look at that guy, he said, pointing at Jake. New kid on the block. Thinks he can just park that ugly truck anywhere. Larry nodded. Yeah, he said. That truck's an eyesore. Ruins the street. Tom scratched his chin. We should do something about it. Larry grinned. Oh, we will. We'll show him who's in charge. They laughed together, quiet, sneaky laughs. They didn't like Jake. They didn't like his truck. They didn't like that he was new and didn't know their rules. So they decided right then and there, Jake was their next target. Their next victim. They were going to mess with him. Big time. But Jake didn't know that yet. Or did he? See, Jake wasn't the type to brag. He didn't talk a lot. He didn't show off. When he parked his truck in front of his house, he didn't think twice about it. It was his spot. His house. His street now, too. He wasn't breaking any real rules. He wasn't hurting anyone. He just wanted to move in, fix up his place, and live his life. So after he waved at the neighbors, he opened his front door and carried his toolbox inside. Then he came back out for more stuff, some bags, a lamp, a chair. He hummed a little song while he worked. He looked happy. He looked calm. He didn't look like a guy who was about to get into trouble. But trouble was coming. Oh yes, it was. The sun was still high in the sky. Birds chirped in the trees. A breeze rustled the leaves. Maplewood looked picture perfect. The lady across the street watered her flowers. The kid on the bike rode in circles. The old man with the hose waved at Jake again. Everything seemed fine. Everything seemed normal. But down the street, Tom and Larry kept watching. They stood on their porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. They just stared at Jake and his truck. Tomorrow, Tom said. We'll start tomorrow. Larry nodded. Yup. He'll wish he never moved here. They turned and went inside, plotting their next move. Back at his house, Jake set his chair on the porch. He wiped sweat off his forehead and took a big sip of water from a bottle. He looked around again. The street was pretty. The houses were neat. The neighbors seemed nice, well, most of them. He didn't see Tom and Larry. He didn't hear their whispers. He didn't know about their fake HOA patrol yet. But even if he did, would he care? Probably not. Because Jake wasn't scared of much. He was tough in his own quiet way. He'd faced bigger problems than nosy neighbors before. Way bigger. And that secret he had. That trick up his sleeve. It was going to come in handy real soon. Let's talk about Jake for a second. Jake wasn't tall or short. He wasn't skinny or fat. He was just Jake. Medium height, medium build, with brown hair that stuck up a little. His hands were rough from working hard, maybe fixing cars or building things. His smile was big and real, the kind that made you want to smile back. He didn't wear fancy clothes or drive a fancy car. His truck was old, sure, but it worked. It got him where he needed to go. And that was enough for Jake. He didn't need to impress anyone. He didn't need to show off. He was happy being himself. But being himself was about to make some people mad. The day went on. The sun started to dip lower in the sky. Shadows stretched across the street. Jake kept unpacking. He carried boxes inside. He hung a picture on the wall. He plugged in his lamp and turned it on. The light glowed through his window, warm and cozy. Outside, the neighborhood settled down. The kid on the bike went home. The lady with the flowers turned off her sprinkler. The old man put away his hose. It was getting quiet again. Peaceful again. But not for long. Because Tom and Larry? They weren't done. They were just getting started. So here's the big question, was Jake just a regular guy? Was he really as simple as he seemed? New truck, new house, big smile? Or was something bigger brewing? Was there more to Jake than anyone knew? Think about it. A guy moves into a quiet neighborhood. He doesn't make trouble. He doesn't cause a fuss. But two sneaky neighbors decide to pick on him anyway. Why? Because they don't like his truck? Because he's new? Or because they think they can get away with it? What do you think? Is Jake going to let them win? Or does he have something up his sleeve, something that'll surprise everyone? Stick around to find out. This is just the beginning. Maplewood might look sleepy and calm, but things are about to get wild. Jake's truck is parked. Tom and Larry are plotting. And that secret Jake's hiding? It's going to change everything. Don't go anywhere, because the fun's just starting. What's going to happen next? You'll see soon. Really soon. Tom and Larry thought they were the kings of Maplewood. They strutted around the neighborhood like they owned every house, every tree, every blade of grass. They didn't walk, they marched. Heads high, chests out, acting big and tough. They wore cheap badges pinned to their shirts. The badges were little squares of plastic, probably bought from some junky online store for $1. They had HOA Patrol written on them in wobbly black marker. HOA. That's supposed to mean Homeowners Association, a group that makes rules for a neighborhood. But Maplewood didn't have a real HOA. Nope. Tom and Larry made it up. It was all pretend. Fake. A big, silly lie. But they didn't care. They liked bossing people around. Tom was the leader. He was tall and skinny, with a pointy nose that stuck out like a bird's beak. His eyes were small and mean, always squinting at something or someone. He'd yell orders like he was a cop or a teacher. No loud music, he'd shout at kids playing radios in their yards. Trim your grass, he'd snap at old Mr. Jenkins, who liked his lawn a little wild. Larry was his buddy, his follower. Larry was short and round, with a big belly that jiggled when he laughed. And he laughed a lot, loud, mean laughs that made you feel small. Together, they'd march up and down the street, pointing at things they didn't like. Fix that mailbox, they'd say. Paint that fence. Most folks in Maplewood didn't listen. They'd roll their eyes. They'd turn away. They'd whisper, "Those guys are nuts." But Tom and Larry didn't stop. They loved it. They loved feeling big. Most people ignored them. The lady with the flowers? She'd just keep watering her roses when they yelled. The kid on the bike? He'd pedal faster and laugh. Old Mr. Jenkins? He'd wave his hand like shooing a fly and go back inside. Tom and Larry didn't scare anyone. Not really. They were loud, sure. They were bossy, sure. But they were also kind of funny like clowns who didn't know they were clowns. Nobody took them seriously. Nobody thought they could really do anything. They were just two goofy guys with fake badges and big mouths. Until Jake showed up. Oh boy, when Jake rolled in, everything changed. Jake was the new guy. He'd moved into the little house with the blue door just yesterday. His old truck sat in front of his place, scratched and noisy but still running. He had a big smile and a friendly wave. He didn't seem like trouble. He didn't act loud or mean. He was just Jake unpacking boxes, fixing stuff, sipping water on his porch. But Tom and Larry? They didn't like him. Not one bit. They saw his truck parked there, right on the street, and their eyes got narrow. Their frowns got deeper. Who's this guy? Tom muttered, watching from their porch. Thinks he can park anywhere, Larry grumbled back. They didn't like new people. They didn't like change. And they really didn't like that Jake wasn't scared of them yet. So they decided, Jake was their next target. Their next chance to show off their pretend power. The very next day, bright and early, with the sun just peeking over the trees, something new showed up. A sign. A no parking sign. It was stuck in the ground right in front of Jake's house, like it grew there overnight. The sign was tall and skinny, painted white with big, bold black letters, "No parking." It looked real. Really real. The paint was smooth. The words were clear. It even had a little arrow pointing at Jake's truck, like it was saying, "Hey, you. Move it." Tom did it. He hammered it into the dirt with a big mallet, banging away while the neighborhood was still sleepy. Bang. 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 The sound echoed down the street. Larry stood next to him, holding the sign steady, grinning like a kid with a new toy. "That'll teach the new guy," Tom said, wiping sweat off his forehead. "Yeah," Larry said, nodding fast. "He'll move that junky truck now. He'll learn who's boss." They thought it was perfect. They thought Jake would wake up, see the sign, and freak out. They pictured him scratching his head, looking confused. They pictured him jumping in his truck, starting it up, rattle, rattle, and driving it away. Maybe he'd park it in his backyard. Maybe he'd hide it down the street. Either way, they figured he'd give up. He'd bow to their fake rules. He'd let them win. Because that's what everyone else did well, sort of. Most people ignored Tom and Larry, but they didn't fight back. Jake, though. Jake was different. Jake didn't do what they expected. Not even close. Jake woke up that morning like it was any other day. The sun was shining. Birds were singing. He yawned, stretched, and made some coffee. He poured it into a big blue mug and walked out onto his porch. His truck was still there, parked right where he left it. And there was the sign "No Parking" staring him in the face. He stopped. He looked at it. He tilted his head a little, like he was thinking. Tom and Larry watched from their porch, peeking through the curtains. "Here it comes," Tom whispered. "He's gonna move it," Larry said, rubbing his hands together. They waited. They held their breath. They thought they'd won already. But then Jake did something they didn't expect. He smiled. A tiny, sneaky grin. Not a big laugh. Not a mad frown. Just a little smile, like he knew something funny they didn't. Jake didn't move his truck. Nope. He didn't jump in and drive away. He didn't yell or stomp his feet. He just stood there on his porch, sipping his coffee, staring at that sign. Sip. 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 The steam curled up from his mug. The sun hit his face. His smile stayed small and sneaky. Something about him said he wasn't scared. Something about him said he wasn't mad. Something about him said he knew more than they thought. Tom and Larry didn't get it. "Why's he smiling?" Larry asked, scratching his head. "He's supposed to be upset." Tom snapped, his frown getting bigger. They didn't understand. They thought their sign would win. They thought Jake would give up. But Jake? He wasn't playing their game. Not yet. The day went on. The sun climbed higher. Kids came out to play. The lady with the flowers watered her roses again. Old Mr. Jenkins sat on his porch with a book. Everything seemed normal except for that sign. It stood there, tall and proud, telling Jake what to do. And Jake struck. It stayed right where it was. Parked. Still. Not moving an inch. Tom and Larry kept watching. They'd walk past Jake's house, pretending to check the street. "Look at that guy," Tom would say. "Thinks he's smart," Larry would add. They'd glare at the truck. They'd glare at the sign. They'd glare at Jake, who was now sitting on his porch with his coffee, reading a newspaper. He didn't look worried. He didn't look rushed. He looked calm. Too calm. Tom got madder. "He's ignoring us," he said, kicking a pebble down the sidewalk. "Nobody ignores the HOA patrol." Larry nodded. "We need to do more. Make him listen." They didn't like that Jake wasn't scared. They didn't like that he didn't move his truck. They didn't like that their big, shiny sign wasn't working. So they started whispering again. Plotting again. What could they do? Yell at him? Put up more signs? Tell him he'd get in trouble? They wanted Jake to feel small. They wanted Jake to obey. They wanted Jake to know they were in charge even though they weren't. Not really. But Jake? He kept sipping his coffee. He kept smiling that tiny, sneaky grin. He'd look at the sign, then look away, like it was no big deal. He'd wave at the neighbors walking by. "Nice day, huh?" he'd say. They'd wave back. "Sure is," they'd answer. Nobody else seemed to care about the sign. Nobody else seemed to notice Tom and Larry's glares. But Jake noticed. Oh, he noticed everything. His eyes were sharp. His ears were open. He saw Tom and Larry strut by. He heard their grumbles. And that smile. It got just a little bigger every time they passed. What was Jake up to? Why wasn't he mad? Why wasn't he scared? Why didn't he move his truck like Tom and Larry wanted? Was he just stubborn? Was he just lazy? Or was there something else going on? Something sneaky? Something smart? Tom and Larry thought they had the upper hand. They thought their fake sign and fake badges made them the bosses. They thought Jake was just some new guy who did. Days went by in Maplewood, and Jake's truck didn't move. Not an inch. It sat there in front of his house, old and scratched, right under that fake no parking sign. The sun came up. The sun went down. Birds chirped. Kids played. But the truck? It stayed put. Tom and Larry couldn't stand it. They were mad. Really, really mad. Their faces turned red. Their hands balled into fists. They stomped around their yard like angry bulls. Who does this guy think he is? Tom snapped one morning. He was pacing back and forth, kicking little rocks with his shoe. Kick. 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 Dirt flew everywhere. Larry stood nearby, nodding fast. Yeah, he said. He's disrespecting us. They didn't like Jake. They didn't like his truck. And they really didn't like that he wasn't scared of their sign. At first, they thought Jake would give up quick. They thought he'd see the sign, shrug, and move his truck. Maybe he'd park it behind his house. Maybe he'd drive it down the street. But no. Jake didn't do that. He didn't listen. He didn't obey. And that made Tom and Larry madder every day. He's gotta learn. Tom said, his voice loud and sharp. We're the HOA patrol. Larry added, puffing out his chest like a big balloon. They still wore those fake badges, little plastic squares pinned to their shirts. The badges were wobbly and cheap, but they acted like they were gold medals. They thought everyone should listen to them. They thought Jake should listen to them. But Jake? He had other ideas. A few days after the sign went up, Tom and Larry tried something new. They wrote notes. Nasty notes. Mean ones. They grabbed a piece of paper and a fat black marker. Tom scribbled fast, his handwriting big and messy. Move it or else, he wrote. The letters were crooked and huge, taking up the whole page. He grinned as he finished. Perfect, he said. Larry laughed. Yeah, that'll scare him. They snuck over to Jake's truck when the sun was low, and nobody was looking. They stuck the note under the windshield wiper. It flapped a little in the breeze, bold and ugly. They ran back to their porch, giggling like sneaky kids. He'll see that tomorrow, Tom said. He'll move it now, Larry said. They thought they'd won. They thought Jake would panic. But guess what? They were wrong. The next morning, Jake came outside. He had his coffee mug in one hand, big and blue, steam curling up. He walked to his truck, slow and calm. He saw the note. Move it or else, it screamed at him. He didn't jump. He didn't frown. He didn't rip it up or throw it away. He just picked it up, read it, and smiled. That same tiny, sneaky grin he had before. He folded the note neat and tucked it in his pocket. Then he sipped his coffee. Sip. 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 He looked at his truck. He looked at the sign. He didn't say a word. He didn't move the truck. He just went back to his porch and sat down. Weird, right? Tom and Larry watched from their house, peeking out the window. He's not moving it? Larry whispered, his eyes wide. What's wrong with him? Tom growled. They didn't get it? Why wasn't Jake scared? Neighbors started to notice. They saw the sign. They saw the truck. They saw the notes because Tom and Larry didn't stop at one. Nope. They wrote more. Get out, said one note. You're in trouble, said another. They left them every day, stuck to the windshield with tape or tucked under the wiper. The papers piled up, flapping in the wind. People walking by would slow down and look. The lady with the flowers tilted her head. What's that all about? She asked old Mr. Jenkins one day. He shrugged. Dunno. That new guy's not moving his truck. The kid on the bike rode past and giggled. Those notes are funny, he said. Everyone whispered. Everyone wondered. Why didn't Jake just give in? Was he stubborn? Was he crazy? Or, was it something else? Something sneaky? Something smart? Jake didn't care about the whispers. He didn't care about the notes. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't knock on Tom and Larry's door and say, stop it. Nope. He just watched. Every morning, he'd come out with his coffee. He'd pick up the new note, read it, and smile. Every afternoon, he'd sit on his porch and watch the street. And every time Tom and Larry marched by strutting like they owned the place, he'd nod at them. Just a little nod. Polite. Friendly. Hey, he'd say, his voice soft. Tom would glare. Larry would huff. They'd keep walking, badges bouncing on their shirts. And Jake? He'd pull out a little notebook from his pocket. A tiny one, with a black cover and a pencil tied to it. He'd scribble something quick, then tuck it away. Scribble, scribble, Scribble. What was he writing? Nobody knew. Not yet. Tom and Larry kept going. They didn't stop with notes. They got louder. They got bolder. One sunny afternoon, they stood in their yard and yelled across the street. "Hey, new guy!" Tom shouted, his voice booming. "Move that truck, or you're in big trouble." Larry jumped in. "Yeah. We're the HOA patrol. You gotta listen." Neighbors poked their heads out. Windows opened. Curtains moved. Everyone heard it. Jake heard it. He was on his porch, rocking in a chair. He didn't yell back. He didn't stand up. He just waved a little wave, like saying hi to a friend. Then he grabbed his notebook and wrote something. "Scribble, scribble." Tom's face got redder. "He's mocking us," he said to Larry. "We need to do more." Larry nodded. "Yeah, more." That night, something funny happened. It was dark. Stars twinkled. The street was quiet. Most people were asleep. But not Jake. He stepped outside, sneaky and soft, like a cat. He had his phone in his hand. The screen glowed bright. He walked to the no parking sign, looked around, and snap, took a picture. The flash lit up the night. Snap. Snap. 2 more pictures. A neighbor, Mrs. Carter, saw him from her window. She was up late, drinking tea. "What's he doing?" she mumbled. Jake looked up, saw her, and winked. "Just keeping a record," he said, his voice low and playful. Then he went back inside. Mrs. Carter blinked. "A record," she said to herself. A record of what? She didn't know. Nobody knew. But the plot? Oh, it was thickening. Getting bigger. Getting twisty. The next day, Tom and Larry turned it up. They weren't just mad now, they were wild. They strutted down the street, yelling louder than ever. "We're gonna find you!" Tom shouted at Jake's house. $50 by Friday or we tow that junk heap." Larry added, his voice so loud it scared a bird out of a tree. $50? Tow the truck? Whoa. That was big. Neighbors gasped. The kid on the bike stopped riding. "They can't do that, can they?" he asked old Mr. Jenkins. The old man scratched his head. "Dunno, kid. They're nuts." Everyone looked at Jake. He was on his porch again, coffee in hand. He heard them. He heard every word. But he didn't yell back. He didn't run over. He just smiled. Wider this time. A big, sneaky smile, like he knew a secret. Like he was waiting for something. Tom and Larry kept bragging. They told everyone who'd listen. "He's got till Friday," Tom said to Mrs. Carter as she watered her flowers. $50, or that truck's gone," Larry said to the mailman, who just shrugged and kept walking. They thought they sounded tough. They thought they sounded scary. They thought Jake would finally give in. But Jake? He didn't budge. Thursday came. The truck stayed. He picked up another note, "Pay up," and tucked it in his pocket. He nodded at Tom and Larry when they marched by. He wrote in his notebook. Scribble, scribble. He took more pictures of the sign at night. Snap, snap. And that smile. It didn't go away. It got bigger. Sneakier. Happier. What was Jake waiting for? Why was he so calm? Why didn't he fight? Was he scared deep down? Was he just pretending? Or was he planning something? That notebook, what was in it? Those pictures, what were they for? Tom and Larry thought they were winning. They thought Jake was weak. They thought their fake sign and fake rules would beat him. But maybe they were wrong. Maybe Jake wasn't weak at all. Maybe Jake was smart. Really smart. Can you guess what he was up to? Can you feel it coming? Something big was on the way. Something that'd surprise everyone, especially Tom and Larry. Stick around. You'll see soon. Really, really soon, D&T know better. But maybe, just maybe, Jake knew more than they did. Maybe Jake had a plan. Maybe Jake wasn't as simple as he looked. What do you think? Is Jake hiding something? Is he ready to fight back? You'll see soon. Really soon. Because this story It's just heating up. Friday came fast in Maplewood. The sun was up, bright and warm. Birds sang in the trees. Kids were ready to play. It was a big day the day Tom and Larry said Jake had to pay. $50, they'd shouted. $50 or they'd tow his truck. They'd bragged about it all week. They'd yelled it loud. They told everyone. And now, Friday was here. Time was up. Tom and Larry were ready to win, or so they thought. They were so sure Jake would lose. So sure he'd give them money or move his truck. They couldn't wait to see him scared. They couldn't wait to laugh. Oh boy, were they in for a surprise. That morning, Tom and Larry got up early. They put on their shirts with the fake badges, those silly plastic squares that said HOA Patrol in messy marker. Tom fixed his hair, trying to look tough. Larry rubbed his hands together, grinning big. Today's the day, Tom said, his voice loud and proud. Yeah, Larry said back. That new guy's gonna pay. They grabbed a little notepad pretending it was official and marched out of their house. Their shoes slapped the pavement. Slap, slap, slap. They strutted down the street, heads high, chests out. They looked like they'd won a prize already. They looked like kings. They headed straight for Jake's house, ready to show him who was boss. Jake's truck was still there. Parked. Old. Scratched. Right in front of his little house with the blue door. The no parking sign stood next to it, tall and white, with bold black letters. Tom and Larry had put it there days ago, thinking it'd scare Jake. It didn't. Notes were stuck to the windshield, move it or else, and pay up. Flapping in the breeze. Jake hadn't moved. He hadn't paid. He hadn't even blinked. And now, Friday was here. Tom and Larry stopped at his porch steps. They looked up. Jake was inside, but they didn't care. They banged on the door. Bang. 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 Come out, newbie. Tom barked, his voice sharp like a dog's. Time's up. Larry yelled, laughing mean. Neighbors heard the noise. Curtains twitched. Windows cracked open. The lady with the flowers peeked out. Old Mr. Jenkins leaned out his door. The kid on the bike stopped riding and stared. Everyone watched. They'd heard Tom and Larry brag all week. They'd seen the notes. They'd seen the sign. They thought Jake might fight. They thought he might yell. They thought something big was coming. And they were right, but not how they expected. The door creaked open. Jake stepped out. He didn't look mad. He didn't look scared. He was calm. Super calm. He had his hands in his pockets. His big smile was gone, but that tiny, sneaky grin was still there. Morning, he said, soft and easy. Tom and Larry grinned wider. They thought they had him. Time's up. Tom said again, louder this time. He held out his hand, palm up. $50. Pay now, or we tow that junk heap. Larry nodded fast. Yeah. You're done, newbie. They stood there, tall and proud, waiting for Jake to cave. They thought he'd pull out his wallet. They thought he'd beg. They thought he'd say, okay, you win. Neighbors held their breath. Would Jake fight? Would he run? Would he give in? Everyone waited. Jake tilted his head. He looked at Tom's hand. He looked at Larry's grin. Then he spoke. You sure you want to play this game? He said. His voice was quiet, but it had a spark. A sneaky spark. Tom blinked. Larry frowned. What? Tom said. Pay up. Larry snapped. They didn't get it. They didn't see what was coming. Before they could say more, before they could yell again, a big noise rolled down the street. Rumble, rumble, rumble. It was loud. It was deep. Everyone turned. A truck came into view. Not Jake's truck, a different one. A city truck. Big and white, with red letters on the side that said Maplewood City Services. It stopped right in front of Jake's house. Dust puffed up. The engine growled, then went quiet. A door swung open. Out hopped a woman. She wore a crisp uniform, blue pants, blue shirt, a shiny badge. A real badge. Her name was Michelle. She was a city inspector. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She looked serious. Tom's jaw dropped. His mouth hung open like a fish. Larry's eyes got huge. His fake badge looked tiny and dumb now. Michelle marched over. Her boots hit the ground hard. Thump, thump, thump. She didn't look at Tom or Larry, not yet. She went straight to the no parking sign. She grabbed it with both hands. She yanked it out of the dirt. Pop. It came up easy, roots and all. She held it high, like a flag, and turned to the crowd. Neighbors gasped. The lady with the flowers dropped her watering can. Old Mr. Jenkins chuckled. The kid on the bike cheered, "Whoa." Michelle's voice cut through the air. "This isn't ours," she said, loud and clear. "This sign? It's fake. It's illegal. Who put it here?" She looked around. Her eyes were sharp. Her face was stern. The street went quiet. Super quiet. You could hear a bird chirp far away. Everyone froze. Tom gulped. Larry shuffled back a step. Their grins were gone. Their faces turned white, then red. They looked at each other. They looked at the sign. They looked at Michelle. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. Neighbors whispered. "Fake," said Mrs. Carter. "Illegal," said the mailman, who'd stopped to watch. Jake stepped forward. He raised his hand, not fast, not scared, just calm. He didn't say, "I did it." Nope. He pointed. Straight at Tom and Larry. "They did," he said, nodding at them. His voice was steady. His sneaky grin grew a little. Tom's mouth moved, but no words came out. Larry shook his head fast. "And no," he stammered. But Jake wasn't done. Oh no. The big moment was here. Jake looked at Michelle. He looked at the neighbors. He spoke again. "I called the city last week," he said. "Took some pics of that sign. Checked the rules. It's all wrong. Oh, and by the way, I work for the municipal office." Boom. That was it. The bombshell. The secret. The trick up his sleeve. He didn't just live in Maplewood. He worked for the city. The real city. Not some fake HOA patrol. He knew the rules. He knew what was legal. He knew what was fake. And he'd been ready. "Thought you'd like to know," he said to Michelle, "these guys have been faking it." He nodded at Tom and Larry again. His voice was cool. His eyes sparkled. He'd caught them. The street went silent again. Dead silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed loud. Tom's face went bright red, like a tomato. Larry's legs wobbled. He took a step back, then another. He wanted to run. He turned, ready to bolt down the street. But Michelle stepped forward. "Oh no, you don't," she said, her voice like a whip. She pointed at him. "Stay right there." Larry froze. His fake badge fell off his shirt and hit the ground. Plop. It looked so small now. So silly. Tom tried to talk. "We didn't mean," he started. Michelle cut him off. "You two are in big trouble," she said. Big trouble." Her words were heavy. Her eyes were mad. Tom and Larry shrank. They didn't look like kings anymore. They looked like scared kids. Neighbors exploded. They cheered. They clapped. "Yes," shouted the kid on the bike, pumping his fist. "Got 'em," yelled old Mr. Jenkins, laughing hard. Mrs. Carter smiled big. "I knew that sign was fishy," she said. The mailman shook his head. "Wow," he muttered. Everyone looked at Jake. Jake didn't cheer. He didn't clap. He just leaned against his truck, his old, scratched truck that never moved. He crossed his arms. He watched. That sneaky grin stayed on his face. He didn't need to say more. He didn't need to brag. He'd won. Big time. And Tom and Larry? They'd lost. Bigger time. Michelle held the sign up again. "This is illegal," she said to the crowd. "Nobody can put up fake signs. Nobody can pretend to be in charge. These two broke the rules." She glared at Tom and Larry. They looked down. They looked at their shoes. They looked anywhere but at her. "We'll deal with them," Michelle said. She turned to Jake. Thanks for the call, she said. Jake nodded. Anytime, he said, soft and easy. Michelle climbed back into her truck. She tossed the sign in the back. Clang. It was gone. Done. Over. Tom and Larry stood there, small and quiet, waiting for what came next. Who saw that coming? Not Tom. Not Larry. Not the neighbors. But Jake? He'd known all along. He'd waited. He'd watched. He'd planned. That notebook. Full of notes about the sign. Those pictures. Proof for the city. His job. The key to it all. He wasn't just some guy with a truck. He was smart. He was sneaky. He was ready. And now, everyone knew. Tom and Larry thought they'd win. They thought they'd scare him. They thought wrong. Jake had turned it all around. The fake kings were down. The quiet guy was up. What a twist. What a day. What a big, big reveal. The air in Maplewood buzzed. Michelle stood tall by her city truck, holding that fake no parking sign like it was trash. Tom and Larry didn't move. They couldn't. Their feet were stuck to the ground, like glue held them there. Tom's face was still redder than a ripe apple. Sweat dripped down his forehead. Drip, drip, drip. He wiped it with his sleeve, but it kept coming. Larry's hands shook. His fake badge lay in the dirt, looking sad and small. Neighbors kept cheering. Way to go, Jake, shouted the kid on the bike. He rode in circles, pumping his fists. Old Mr. Jenkins clapped so hard his hands turned pink. About time, he said, grinning big. Mrs. Carter nodded fast. I never liked those two, she whispered to the mailman. Everyone loved it? Everyone except Tom and Larry. Jake stayed calm. He leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching it all. His old truck looked prouder now, like it knew it had won, too. The scratches on its sides? They didn't matter. The rattling noise it made? Nobody cared. It was Jake's truck, and it wasn't going anywhere. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. That sneaky grin on his face said everything. He'd outsmarted them. He'd waited. He'd won. Tom and Larry thought they were the bosses. They thought their fake sign and fake rules would scare him. They thought he'd bow down. Nope. Jake had flipped it all around. He'd turned their game into his game. And now, they were caught like flies in a web. Michelle turned to the crowd again. Listen up, she said, her voice strong. This sign? It's not real. It's not from the city. It's against the law to put up fake signs. You can't do that. These two, she pointed at Tom and Larry, they broke the rules. Big rules. She shook the sign a little, making it wobble. The neighbors nodded. Yeah, shouted the kid on the bike. They're fakers. Mrs. Carter clapped. Good riddance, she said. Old Mr. Jenkins laughed again. Told you they were nuts, he said to the mailman. The mailman smiled. Guess so, he said, tipping his hat. Everyone agreed. Tom and Larry weren't kings. They weren't bosses. They were just two guys who got caught. Tom tried to talk again. We didn't know, he said, his voice wobbly. We were just. Michelle stopped him. Save it, she said, holding up her hand. You knew what you were doing. You can't pretend to be in charge. You can't make up rules. You can't trick people. She looked at Larry. And you, she said. Larry jumped. Me, he stammered. Yes, you, Michelle said. No running. You're in this, too. Larry's shoulders slumped. He looked at the ground. His big belly jiggled a little, but he wasn't laughing now. He wasn't strutting. He wasn't loud. He was quiet. Super quiet. Tom glared at him. This is your fault, he muttered. My fault. Larry snapped back. You made the sign. They started arguing, quiet, mad whispers. Neighbors giggled. Look at them, Mrs. Carter said. Fighting like kids. Jake watched them argue. He didn't laugh. He didn't point. He just stood there, leaning on his truck. His sneaky grin grew a tiny bit more. He pulled that little notebook out of his pocket, the black one with the pencil tied to it. He flipped it open. Pages rustled. He showed it to Michelle. "Here," he said. "Notes. Dates. Times. Everything they did." Michelle took it. She read it fast. Her eyebrows went up. "Wow," she said. "You wrote down everything." Jake nodded. "Yup. Every yell. Every note. Every time they walked by." He tapped his phone in his other pocket. "Got pictures, too. The sign. The notes. All of it." Michelle smiled a small, quick smile. "Smart," she said. "Really smart." The neighbors leaned closer. "What's in the notebook?" the kid on the bike asked, pedaling up. "Proof," Jake said, simple and cool. "Proof they're fakers." The kid's eyes got big. "Cool," he said. Old Mr. Jenkins nodded. "Knew he was sharp," he said. Mrs. Carter clapped again. "Good job, Jake," she called. Jake waved at them, a little wave, not big. "Thanks," he said. He didn't brag. He didn't cheer. He didn't need to. The proof was there. The pictures were there. Michelle had it all now. And Tom and Larry? They had nothing. Nothing but trouble. Michelle turned back to Tom and Larry. "You two," she said, "you're coming with me." Tom's eyes got wide. What?" he said. "Where?" Larry asked, his voice tiny. "To the city office," Michelle said. "We need to talk. You broke laws. You'll get fines. Maybe more." She grabbed a clipboard from her truck. She wrote fast, scribble, scribble. "Faking signs. Pretending to be officials. Harassing people." "That's serious," she said. Tom shook his head. "We didn't harass," he said. Michelle pointed at Jake. "He's got notes. Pictures." "You did." Larry gulped loud. "Fines," he said. "How much?" Michelle looked at him. "A lot," she said. "You'll find out soon." She finished writing. She tore off a paper and handed it to them. "Here's your notice. Don't lose it." Tom took the paper. His hand shook. He read it quick. His face went white. $500, he whispered. Larry peeked over. "Each," he squeaked. Michelle nodded. "Each. And that's just the start. Be good, or it's worse." Tom crumpled the paper a little. "This is crazy," he said. Larry kicked the dirt. "We're ruined," he whined. Neighbors laughed. "Serves you right," shouted the kid on the bike. "No more fake rules," said Mrs. Carter. Old Mr. Jenkins winked at Jake. "You fixed 'em good," he said. Jake just nodded. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The job was done. Michelle climbed into her truck. "Let's go," she said to Tom and Larry. They dragged their feet. Slow. Sad. They didn't strut now. They didn't yell. They climbed in the back of the truck, heads down. The engine roared. Rumble, rumble. The truck rolled away, dust kicking up. The fake sign stuck out the back, wobbling. Neighbors waved. "Bye," the kid shouted, laughing. "Good riddance." Mrs. Carter called. Jake watched them go. He leaned on his truck. His truck that never moved. His truck that won. He sipped his coffee cold now, but he didn't care. That sneaky grin stayed. He'd done it. He'd caught them. He'd won. The street buzzed again. Kids ran over. "Jake, you're awesome," the bike kid said. "How'd you do that?" Jake shrugged. "Just watched. Waited. Called the right people." Mrs. Carter walked up. "You're a hero," she said. Jake shook his head. "Nah. Just fixing a problem." Old Mr. Jenkins hobbled over. "Smart kid," he said. "Knew you had it in you." Jake smiled, a real smile now, not just sneaky. "Thanks," he said. Neighbors kept talking. They kept cheering. They kept laughing. Tom and Larry were gone. The sign was gone. The fake rules were gone. And Jake? He was still here. Calm. Cool. King of the day. Who saw that coming? Nobody. Not Tom. Not Larry. Not even the neighbors, not really. They hoped Jake would fight back. They didn't know how big he'd win. That notebook. Full of secrets. Those pictures. Full of proof. His job. The biggest surprise of all. He wasn't just some guy with a truck. He was Jake's city worker, rule knower, trick hider. He'd waited all week. He'd smiled all week. He'd planned all week. And now, Friday was his day. Tom and Larry thought they'd scare him. They thought they'd beat him. They thought wrong. Jake turned it all upside down. The fake kings fell hard. The quiet guy stood tall. What a moment. What a reveal. What a day in Maplewood. Friday turned into a wild day in Maplewood, but the fun wasn't over yet. Tom and Larry thought they were big shots. They thought they could boss everyone around with their fake HOA patrol. They thought wrong. Turns out, they weren't just annoying, they'd broken real laws. Big laws. Pretending to be an HOA? That's a no-no. Putting up fake signs like that no parking one? That's not allowed. Trying to collect fines from Jake like that $50 they demanded? That's super illegal. They didn't just mess with Jake. They messed with the rules. And the rules? They hit back hard. Michelle, the city inspector, didn't play around. She stood by her big white truck, holding that fake sign. She looked at Tom and Larry with sharp eyes. You two broke the law, she said, her voice loud and clear. Faking an HOA? Making signs? Asking for money? That's serious. Tom's face went pale. Larry's knees wobbled. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to do. Michelle pulled out her clipboard again. She wrote fast, scribble, scribble, scribble. Then she tore off 2 papers. She handed one to Tom. She handed one to Larry. Here, she said. Fines. $500 each. $500? That's a lot of money. Way more than the 50 they wanted from Jake. Tom's eyes got big. 500, he whispered. Larry gulped. Each, he squeaked. Michelle nodded. Yup. Each. And here's a warning, do it again, and it's jail time. Jail time? Whoa. That's huge. Tom and Larry froze. Their fake badges, those silly plastic squares, looked dumber than ever. Neighbors heard it all. They cheered. Yes, shouted the kid on the bike, waving his arms. They're done, yelled old Mr. Jenkins, clapping hard. Mrs. Carter smiled big. Good, she said, nodding fast. Everyone loved it? Tom and Larry didn't look like bosses now. They didn't look tough. They looked small. Really small. Michelle pointed at them. Get in the truck, she said. They dragged their feet. Slow. Sad. They climbed in the back, heads down. Michelle started the engine. Rumble, rumble. The truck rolled away. Tom and Larry slunk off with it, quiet and beat. Their badges. They pulled them off and tossed them in the trash by Jake's house. Plop. Plop. Gone. The HOA patrol was over. Done. Finished. Neighbors kept cheering. They clapped. They laughed. They waved as the truck disappeared down the street. Bye-bye, the kid on the bike shouted, riding in circles. No more fake rules. Mrs. Carter called, her flowers forgotten for a minute. Old Mr. Jenkins chuckled. Best day ever, he said to the mailman. The mailman nodded. Yup, he said, tipping his hat. The street felt happy. It felt light. It felt free. That fake sign was gone. Michelle had it in her truck, headed for the dump. Tom and Larry were gone, too off to face their fines and maybe more. And Jake? He stood there, by his truck, watching it all. Calm. Cool. Quiet. Jake didn't cheer. He didn't jump up and down. He didn't say, I told you so. Nope. He waved off the applause. Just doing my job, he said, his voice soft and easy. Neighbors stopped clapping. They looked at him. Job, said the kid on the bike, tilting his head. What job? Asked Mrs. Carter, stepping closer. Jake smiled a little smile, not too big. I work for the city, he said. The municipal office. I know the rules. I fix problems. Whoa. That was it? The truth. Jake wasn't just some random guy with an old truck. He wasn't just a new neighbor. He was a city worker. A guy who knew what was real and what was fake. A guy who could stop trouble like Tom and Larry. The neighbors gasped. City worker, said old Mr. Jenkins, his eyes wide. No wonder. Mrs. Carter laughed. You're sneaky, she said. The kid on the bike grinned. Cool, he shouted, pedaling faster. Jake nodded. Yup, he said. Saw the sign. Knew it was wrong. Called Michelle last week. He tapped his pocket. That notebook. Full of proof. Dates. Times. What they did. He tapped his other pocket. Those pics? Sent 'em to Michelle. Showed her everything. The neighbors leaned in. Notebook, said the kid. Pics, said Mrs. Carter. Jake pulled out the little black notebook. He flipped it open. Pages rustled. See, he said. Wrote it all down. Every note they left. Every yell. Every strut. He showed his phone. Snapped the sign, too. Sent it straight to the city. Old Mr. Jenkins whistled. Smart kid, he said. Real smart. Mrs. Carter nodded. You got 'em good, she said. The kid on the bike stopped riding. You're like a spy, he said, eyes shining. Jake laughed a quiet laugh. Not a spy, he said. Just a guy who pays attention. He tucked the notebook away. Tom and Larry never stood a chance, he said. And he was right. They didn't. Jake had proof. Jake had pictures. Jake had the city on his side. Tom and Larry? They had fake badges and big mouths. That's it? They lost before they even started. Saturday came. The sun shone again. The street was quiet, no yelling, no strutting, no fake rules. Jake's truck sat there, proud and still. Neighbors walked by. They smiled more now. They waved more now. Things felt different. Better. Freer. Tom and Larry were gone off dealing with their fines. $500 each. Ouch. That'd hurt. And that warning? Do it again, and it's jail time. They wouldn't dare. Not after this. Their HOA patrol was dead. Buried. Forgotten. The trash can by Jake's house had those badges crumpled and tossed. Nobody missed them. Nobody wanted them back. Sunday rolled around. The weekend was calm. Jake sat on his porch, sipping coffee. His blue mug steamed in the cool air. Sip, sip, sip. He rocked in his chair, slow and easy. His truck gleamed a little in the sun, still scratched, still old, but happy. Neighbors started stopping by. The kid on the bike rode up first. Hey, Jake, he said. You're awesome. Jake waved. Thanks, kid, he said. Mrs. Carter came next, carrying a little flower from her garden. For you, she said, handing it over. You fixed our street. Jake took it. Just a flower, he teased. She laughed. You're all right, Jake, she said. Old Mr. Jenkins hobbled over, too. Good work, son, he said. You're one of us now. Jake nodded. Glad to be here, he said. Monday morning arrived. The week started fresh. Jake's truck was still parked right where it always was. Nobody cared about it now. Nobody glared. Nobody left notes. It was just Jake's truck, part of Maplewood. Neighbors who'd ignored him before? They didn't anymore. They stopped to say hi. Morning, Jake, called the mailman, waving big. Hey, Jake, said the lady with the flowers, smiling wide. You're all right, Jake, said a guy walking his dog, laughing as the pup barked. Jake waved back every time. Morning, he'd say. Hey, he'd say. He didn't gloat. He didn't brag. He was just Jake, quiet, friendly, smart Jake. The street felt freer than ever. No fake signs. No fake rules. No fake bosses yelling loud. Kids played louder now, laughing, running, riding bikes. Dogs barked happier. Flowers looked brighter. Even old Mr. Jenkins left his grass a little wild, grinning at it. "No HOA to bug me," he said, chuckling. Everyone felt it. Everyone liked it. Tom and Larry's mess was gone. Their tricks were gone. Their power? Never real. And that fake no parking sign? Michelle had taken it straight to the dump. It landed there Friday night, buried under trash, smashed and forgotten. Right where it belonged. Right where it'd stay. Jake kept living his life. He fixed his house. He unpacked boxes. He waved at neighbors. He sipped coffee on his porch. He didn't talk about Tom and Larry. He didn't need to. Everyone else did. "Remember those fakers?" the kid on the bike said one day, giggling. "Yup," said Mrs. Carter. Jake showed M. Old Mr. Jenkins told the story to the mailman. "New guy took M down," he said, proud. The mailman nodded. "He's a keeper," he said. Jake heard it all. He smiled that sneaky grin sometimes, but he didn't say much. He'd done his job. He'd fixed the problem. That was enough. Days turned into weeks. Maplewood stayed happy. Jake's truck stayed parked. Neighbors stayed friendly. Tom and Larry? Nobody saw them much. Word got around they'd paid their fines, grumbling the whole time. $500 each. Oof. They didn't strut anymore. They didn't yell anymore. They stayed quiet, heads down, hiding in their house. The HOA patrol was a memory, a funny, silly memory. Kids laughed about it. Adults shook their heads. "Good thing Jake came along," they'd say. And they were right. Jake made it right. Jake made it fair. Jake made it free. Justice was served. Big justice. Tom and Larry learned, don't fake it. Don't trick people. Don't mess with the rules. Jake showed them. He didn't fight with fists. He didn't yell with words. He used smarts. He used proof. He used his job. And he won. The street won. Maplewood won. That fake sign in the dump? It was the end of the story. The end of the trouble. The start of something better. Jake was all right. More than all right. He was the guy who fixed it all just by being Jake. Wow, what a wild ride that was. Tom and Larry thought they were the bosses of Maplewood. They strutted around with fake badges, yelling at everyone, making up silly rules. They put up that no parking sign and thought they'd scare Jake. They thought he'd give up, move his truck, or pay their fake fine. They judged him fast, saw his old, scratched truck and his easy smile and said, "This guy's nothing." Oh boy, were they wrong. Jake didn't yell. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He stayed quiet. He watched. He waited. And then bam, he won big. So, what's the lesson here? Let's talk about it. Let's think about it. Let's figure it out together. Sometimes the quiet guy is the strongest one. Think about Jake. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't brag or show off. He just moved into Maplewood with his beat-up truck and big smile. Neighbors saw him and thought, "Oh, he's just some guy." Tom and Larry saw him and thought, "Oh, we can boss him around." They didn't look closer. They didn't ask questions. They didn't wonder. They judged him by what they saw: old truck, messy hair, simple clothes. They thought that's all he was. But Jake? He was more. Way more. He was the one holding all the cards. What cards? Smart cards. Secret cards. Winning cards. He had a job with the city. He had a notebook full of proof. He had pictures on his phone. He had a plan. And nobody saw it coming. Tom and Larry didn't see the fighter underneath. That's the big thing. Jake looked easygoing. He waved at people. He sipped coffee on his porch. He nodded at Tom and Larry when they yelled. But inside? Inside, he was tough. Inside, he was ready. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to argue. He just watched them strut by. He wrote in his notebook, scribble, scribble. He took pictures of that fake sign, snap, snap. He called the city and told Michelle everything. He waited for the right moment. And when Friday came, he showed everyone who he really was. A quiet fighter. A smart fighter. A winner. Tom and Larry never guessed. They thought loud meant strong. They thought fake badges meant power. Nope. Jake proved them wrong. Quiet can be strong, too. So, what can we learn from Jake? What's the big lesson? Here it is: sometimes people push you around. Sometimes they make up rules that aren't real. Sometimes they act big and tough, like Tom and Larry did. Maybe it's a kid at school saying, "You can't sit here," when it's not their seat. Maybe it's a friend saying, "Give me your candy," or "You're not cool," when they're just being mean. Maybe it's someone telling you what to do, even though they don't have the right. What do you do then? Do you yell? Do you cry? Do you give in? Maybe not. Maybe you take a page from Jake's book. What's that mean? It means you watch. You wait. You win. Let's break it down. Watch like Jake did. He didn't jump up when Tom and Larry put up that sign. He didn't get mad when they left notes on his truck, "Move it or else." He didn't stomp over and fight. He watched them. He saw them strut. He saw them yell. He saw them act like bosses. He paid attention. He noticed everything. You can do that, too. If someone's pushing you around, look at what they're doing. Are they loud? Are they sneaky? Are they faking it? Watch them close. See what's real. See what's not. Jake watched, and it helped him win. Watching is smart. Watching is strong. Next, wait. Jake didn't rush. He didn't fix it the first day. He didn't call the city right after the sign went up. He waited. He let Tom and Larry keep going. He let them leave more notes. He let them yell louder. He let them think they were winning. Why? Because waiting made his plan better. Waiting gave him more proof. Waiting made the big moment bigger. You can wait, too. If someone's bothering you, don't always fight back fast. Don't always run away fast. Wait a little. Think a little. See what happens. Maybe they'll trip up. Maybe they'll show they're fake. Jake waited, and it worked. Waiting can work for you, too. Then win. Jake didn't just watch and wait to sit there. He did it to win. He used his smarts. He used his job. He used his proof. When Friday came, he stepped out calm and cool. "You sure you want to play this game?" he said to Tom and Larry. Then Michelle showed up. Boom. The city truck rolled in. The fake sign got yanked out. Tom and Larry got caught. Jake won big. Not with fists. Not with shouts. With brains. You can win like that, too. If someone's pushing you with fake rules, use your head. Tell someone who can help, like a teacher or a grown-up. Show them what's happening. Be smart. Be patient. Win your way. Let's think about it more. Imagine you're at school. A kid says, "You can't play here, it's my spot." But it's not really their spot. It's the playground, everyone's spot. What do? Maybe you watch them. See if they boss other kids, too. Maybe you wait. See if they leave or get bored. Then you win. Tell the teacher, "Hey, they're making up rules." Show her how they act. Be like Jake. Or maybe at home your big sister says, "Give me your toy, or I won't let you watch TV." But she doesn't own the TV. Watch her. Wait till she's not looking. Win by telling your mom, "She's tricking me." Jake's way works. It's quiet. It's smart. It's strong. Tom and Larry didn't get it. They judged Jake wrong. They saw his old truck and thought, "He's weak." They saw his smile and thought, "He's scared." They didn't see the fighter. They didn't see the plan. They didn't see the power. And that was their mistake. Next time someone tries to push you around, next time they act big with fake rules, don't let them fool you. Don't let them win fast. Look closer. Think harder. Be like Jake. The quiet one can be the winner. The overlooked one can be the champ. You can hold the cards, too. You can watch. You can wait. You can win. What if Jake hadn't done it? What if he'd moved his truck that first day? Tom and Larry would have kept going. They'd have bossed more people. They'd have made more fake signs. They'd have yelled louder. Maplewood would have stayed stuck with fake rules and mean tricks. But Jake didn't give in. He didn't bow down. He stood up quietly, smartly, strongly. He fixed it. He freed the street. He showed everyone, you don't have to be loud to be tough. You don't have to be big to be right. You just have to be you, smart you, patient you, winning you. So, that's the lesson. Sometimes the quiet guy, the one everyone overlooks, is the one holding all the cards. Tom and Larry learned it the hard way. They got fines $500 each. Ouch. They got caught. They got stopped. And Jake? He got cheers. He got smiles. He got a free street. Next time someone tries to push you with fake rules, remember Jake. Watch like he did. Wait like he did. Win like he did. You don't need to shout. You don't need to cry. You just need to be smart. You just need to be ready. You just need to be you. That's it for today's story. What did you think? Was it fun? Was it cool? Did Tom and Larry get what they deserved? I think so. They were mean. They were sneaky. They were fake. And Jake? He was awesome. He was quiet. He was strong. Tell me what you think in the comments. Did you like how Jake won? Did you laugh when Tom and Larry lost? Did you cheer when Michelle pulled that sign out? I bet you did. And hey, have you ever outsmarted a bully like Jake did? Maybe at school? Maybe at home? Maybe with a friend? Tell me your story. I want to hear it. I want to know how you watched, waited, and won. Thanks for sticking with me. This tale was full of twists, fake signs, sneaky grins, big surprises. Jake showed us how to be smart. He showed us how to be strong. He showed us how to be cool. See you next time for more stories, more fun, more lessons, more wins. They'll keep you hooked. They'll make you smile. They'll make you think. Bye for now. Wave at me in the comments. Tell me hi. Tell me what you loved. See you soon. Okay, we're not done yet. Let's dig even deeper into Jake's story and what it means for you. It's so cool to think about, right? Tom and Larry thought they had it all figured out. They thought their loud voices and fake badges made them the kings of Maplewood. They thought Jake was just some guy, some quiet guy with an old truck who'd do whatever they said. But Jake surprised them. He surprised everyone. He showed us that being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Being quiet can mean you're strong, super strong. Being quiet can mean you're smart, super smart. Being quiet can mean you're ready to win. Let's talk more about that. Let's see how you can use it. Let's make it fun. Think about Jake one more time. He didn't look like a hero at first. His truck was old. It rattled. It had scratches all over it. His clothes weren't fancy. His hair was messy. He didn't talk loud or act big. He just smiled and waved and sipped his coffee. Tom and Larry saw all that and laughed. He's easy, they said. We'll boss him around, they said. They judged him fast. Too fast. They didn't look deeper. They didn't see the real Jake, the Jake who worked for the city, the Jake who knew the rules, the Jake who had a sneaky plan. They missed it all. And that's why they lost. That's why Jake won. Because the quiet guy? He was holding all the cards. What are those cards? Let's name them. First card, smarts. Jake was smart. He didn't just get mad when he saw that no parking sign. He thought about it. He checked the rules. He knew it was fake because of his job. Second card, watching. Jake watched everything. He saw Tom and Larry strut by. He saw them leave notes. He saw them yell. He didn't miss a thing. Third card, waiting. Jake didn't rush. He let them keep going. He let them think they were winning. He waited for Friday, the perfect day. Fourth card, proof. Jake had his notebook. Scribble, scribble. He had his pictures. Snap, snap. He had it all ready to show Michelle. Those cards. They beat Tom and Larry's loud mouths and fake badges every time. You've got cards, too. Yup, you do. You might not work for the city like Jake, but you've got your own powers. Maybe your card is listening. You hear what people say. You notice stuff. Maybe your card is thinking. You figure things out. You make plans. Maybe your card is waiting. You're patient. You don't give up fast. Maybe your card is telling. You know how to tell a grown-up when something's wrong. Those are big cards. Strong cards. Winning cards. Tom and Larry didn't see Jake's cards. Don't let anyone miss yours. Hold them tight. Use them smart. Win like Jake. Let's try another picture in your head. Imagine you're at the park. A kid says, "You can't climb the slide, it's mine." But it's the park slide, everyone's slide. He's loud. He's standing there, arms crossed, acting big. What do? Do you push him? Do you shout? Or do you watch like Jake? See if he climbs it all day or if he leaves. Wait like Jake. Let him show off a little. Then win like Jake. Walk over when he's gone and climb it. Or tell the park grown-up, he's not sharing. The grown-up says, everyone climbs. You're up there, sliding down, laughing. You didn't yell. You didn't fight. You used your cards. You won quiet. You won smart. Or maybe it's with your toys. Your little brother says, "That's my car, now give it." But it's yours. You got it for your birthday. He's grabbing. He's whining. What do? Watch, see him play with his own toys first. Wait, let him get busy with something else. When keep your car and say, "No, it's mine." Or tell your dad, he's trying to take it. Dad says, "Give it back." You're playing with your car again. No shouting. No crying. Just smarts. Just patience. Just Jake. You're the quiet fighter. You're the sneaky winner. You're the one holding the cards. Let's think bigger. What if it's a team? You're playing soccer at school. A kid says, "You can't kick the ball, you're not good." But it's your team, too. He's loud. He's kicking it away from you. What do? Watch, see how he plays. Wait, let him run around a bit. When tell the coach, he's not passing. Coach says, "Teamwork, everyone kicks." You get the ball. You kick it. Maybe you score. Everyone cheers. You didn't yell at the kid. You didn't quit the game. You watched. You waited. You won. Jake would like that. Jake would say, "Nice one." Tom and Larry didn't know any of this. They thought loud was best. They thought fake was fine. They thought Jake was weak. Big mistake. Jake showed them quiet beats loud. Smart beats fake. Waiting beats rushing. They got fines $500 each. They got a warning, jail if they try again. They threw their badges in the trash. They lost everything. Why? Because they judged wrong. They didn't see the real Jake. They didn't see the fighter. They didn't see the winner. But you see it now. You see how Jake did it? You see how you can do it, too. What's your quiet power? Think about it. Are you good at watching? Do you notice stuff nobody else does? Like when your friend forgets their lunch and you share yours. That's smart. That's strong. Are you good at waiting? Do you stay calm when someone's being silly? Like when your sister takes your turn and you wait till she's done. That's smart. That's strong. Are you good at winning? Do you fix things your way? Like when you tell your teacher about a mean kid and it stops? That's smart. That's strong. You're like Jake. You've got cards. You've got power. You've got a chance to win. Let's make it a game. Next time someone tries to boss you with fake rules, play Jake's game. Step 1, watch. Look at them. What are they doing? Are they loud? Are they sneaky? Step 2, wait. Don't jump in fast. Let them keep going. See what happens. Step 3, win. Use your smarts. Tell someone. Show proof. Fix it quiet. Win big. Try it tomorrow. Try it at school. Try it at home. See how it feels. See how it works. You might surprise yourself. You might surprise everyone just like Jake did. So, one last time, what's the lesson? Sometimes the quiet guy, the one everyone overlooks, is the one holding all the cards. Tom and Larry judged Jake by his old truck and easy smile. They didn't see the fighter underneath. They didn't see the winner underneath. But you see it. You know it. Next time someone tries to push you around with fake rules, take a page from Jake's book. Watch, wait, and win. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be big. You just need to be you, smart you, patient you, winning you. That's it for today's story. What did you think? Was it the best? Was it fun? Did Tom and Larry get what they deserved? I say yes. They were bossy. They were fake. They got caught, big fines, big trouble. And Jake? He was the coolest. He was quiet. He was strong. Tell me in the comments, what did you love? Did you cheer when the sign came down? Did you laugh when Tom and Larry got scared? I bet you did. And hey, have you ever outsmarted a bully like Jake did? Maybe at recess? Maybe with a friend? Tell me your tale. Share how you watched, waited, and won. I can't wait to read it. Thanks for hanging out with me. This story was wild, fake signs, sneaky plans, big surprises. Jake showed us how to be awesome. He showed us how to be tough. He showed us how to be smart. See you next time for more tales, more fun, more twists, more wins. They'll keep you hooked. They'll make you smile. They'll make you think. Bye for now. Wave at me in the comments. Say hi. Tell me what rocked. See you soon.